Welcome back to The Collective Appreciation. I'm your host, Gunnar Anderson. I am a screenwriter, actor, producer, and published author living and working in Los Angeles, California. I'm also a certified personal trainer and strength coach, and especially as it pertains to today's video, I'm a big nerd, an action figure collector. I'm a fan of all things DC, Marvel, Star Wars, and those three things, the movie business, fitness and exercise, and action figure collecting, they make up what I consider my collective appreciation, the things that I really love. So if you're a fan of any of those three things, or if you're like me and you like all three, this is going to be a really fun spot for you, and I would strongly consider subscribing. Join me on this journey as we talk about our favorite stuff. So today's video may ruffle some feathers. Not intentionally. My goal with this topic is to share my personal experience, not throw shade at anyone's personal collecting habits or hobbies. I think this is action figure collecting is a very personal hobby. I think a lot of people do it a bunch of different ways. And I don't want to call anybody out. This is, again, based on my personal experience. But today, we are going to talk about the differences and striking, scary similarities between collecting and hoarding. And I think the two are perhaps more closely linked than we like to think, or perhaps like to admit. Certainly was for me. So let's start with the definition of each. The definition of collecting is bring or gather together, things typically when scattered or widespread. The definition of hoarding is the practice of accumulating and hiding or storing away goods or resources. Now, there is this very important little note when you just Google the similarities. Collecting is an organized, purposeful hobby focused on specific items that can be displayed and enjoyed, while hoarding is a mental health disorder characterized by excessive, unorganized accumulation of items that severely restrict or disrupt or endanger daily living. So obviously the point of today's video is not to suggest that those of us who collect action figures are endangering our daily lives. But the idea of storing away goods, that's kind of what I want to focus on. Okay. To me, what I have learned through a painfully long and trial and error process is my collection is best when it's minimized. Now, if you ask my friends or wife if my collection is minimized, they might laugh in your face. But to me, it's very minimalistic. I could sit here right now and on a piece of paper, I could write down every single figure that's in my collection. And I could tell you why I have them. I could tell you why I like them, and I could tell you what they mean to me. And a couple weeks ago, that wasn't the case. Couldn't have done that. Not that laser focused, at least. I just recently did a massive pruning of the collection. And there's a couple reasons for that. We'll get into it in a moment. But I think it's important to understand, like I said, everybody has their own way of doing things. I am not an inbox collector. I am not a display collector. I am a purchase a figure, take a photo, maybe it stays on my desk, and then it goes into a storage bin in the guest room closet, which is hilarious when we have guests stay with us and they open the closet to hang up their clothes and they're kind of like, what is this? That's my action figure collection. Very funny surprise. But I don't like them out and about. It's not my thing. I keep a few on my desk in the office. Sometimes just one or two. Sometimes I'll have like a few of them, but they do help me. They especially when I'm writing, they kind of connect me to this magical sense of creativity that I had as a child, that kind of like unlocked potential that's not burdened down by the real world or being an adult. It's just, I can look at a figure and I can think back to simpler times, and I feel like something about that just lets the creativity flow. But other than that, I don't like to keep them out. I like to have them, but I don't like to keep them out. And let's be perfectly honest. When I hit a block or when I come to a stopping place, it's kind of fun to have something to fidget with or play with, just saying. And they're fun talking points too. Like I was on a Zoom a few weeks ago with a producer, And he was like, I could tell he was like looking at something over my shoulder. And eventually he goes, "Is that Darkseid over your shoulder?" And I was like, "Yes, it is." And we had a little like side tangent about DC Comics. It's fun stuff. But being a bin collector, I don't know if that's a term, but we're going to roll with it. It's super easy to lose track of what you have. I literally had figures in bins that I hadn't taken out or looked at or messed with in years. They were just taking up space in my home. And they are not providing any nostalgia. They're not providing any joy. They're just kind of there, taking up space, and that thought drove me nuts. So over the holidays, I pulled out every single bin. I put them all in the living room while my wife was gone. Don't want her to see how many there are. Just kidding. Don't lie to your partner about your collecting habits. She knows very well how many there are. She's painfully aware of it. But I took them all out, and I looked through them all, and I did a very thorough examination of every single figure. What purpose are they serving? Why did I have them? Did I even like them? And this led me to a frightening realization. I didn't necessarily have this figure because I liked it. I had it because I thought I needed it. And I had this figure because at some point I had seen a toy influencer talk about how great it was. Or I'd seen a splash page in a comic where this character was standing next to, I don't know, say Superman. And I thought, oh, if this character has interacted with Superman at one point in the 100-year run of DC Comics, I must need them in my collection. Or the idea of team building. Team building is super dangerous. Like I have this figure and he's part of this team. And to complete this team, I only need 4 more figures. I don't know who those 4 figures are. I don't know anything about them. I don't even necessarily know that I like them, but I know that if I buy those 4 figures and having this one, I will have a complete team. You can see how this is a slippery slope. If you let these thoughts kind of reach an obsessive compulsive nature, it's really, really, really slippery slope, and it's very hard to shake. And social media is dangerous for this stuff. I think toy influencers, to me, are the most powerful influencers when it comes to the personal influence they have on me to go buy something. And I'll see their posts or I'll watch their reviews. I'm a big advocate of watching toy reviews. If you're going to buy something, you should know exactly what it is. Is it worth your money? Is it worth your time? And I will watch a video and I will feel this sense of need sink in, like that I need to have this thing. And it's very hard to shake. Once it sets in, it's very hard to shake. And this led me to a collection that was built up, I would say, of 50% of figures that I didn't have any emotional connection to. None. And like I don't know who Metron is. Okay? I know he's a Fourth World character. I know he goes with Orion. I know Orion is the son of Darkseid, and I like Darkseid. So I must need Metron, a character I have literally never seen an illustration of. But he was sitting in a bin, taking up space. You get the idea. So we'll get to the pruning later, but I want to explain how I got here, my collecting journey, if you will. I think that was not a nose pick. That was just, I had an itch right here, just to clarify. We're not going to edit that out. We're not going to edit anything. My collecting journey. I have played with action figures since I was a little kid. Okay. My parents both worked, and I spent a lot of time alone or with a babysitter. And that's not because I had a sad childhood. It's because when both of your parents work, that's what you do. And I played with action figures to pass the time. They were like essentially my friends. It was like a built-in companion that I always had. I could always, no matter where I was or what I was doing, what my parents were doing, how long I was alone, how long I was a babysitter, I could entertain myself for endless hours if I had action figures. And it was Batman the Animated Series, Spider-Man the Animated Series, X-Men. I want to say the Animated Series, but they kind of did a line, Toy Biz did, where it was like kind of the Animated Series, kind of just comic book characters. And then Power of the Force. And this was right before the prequels came out, like mid to late 90s. But even after the prequels came out, episode 1, I still preferred the Power of the Force line. I liked my Darth Vader and Stormtroopers and Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, all that stuff. And then when my parents divorced, I was going between my mom's house and my dad's house, and having this kind of the adjustment factor of going from house to house where nothing really felt stable, nothing felt like home. The action figures were like a constant to me. And I could bring a little piece of my collection out to my dad's house that I wasn't very familiar with. And all of a sudden it felt very homey because I had my toys with me. And so they meant a lot to me. Okay. And I played with action figures until I was around, I would say the 4th grade was when I stopped playing with them. I think the last line of figures that I distinctly remember playing with was the Toy Biz Marvel Legends. Maybe that and G.I. Joe versus Cobra. And then fast forward a little bit to the summer of 2008 when Indiana Jones, Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, and The Dark Knight came out. I must have been in a Target or a Walmart or something. It was very random. And I remember seeing those figures and it just got me. Like the bug got me. I was like, I want that. I want that on a bookshelf or something. And I remember leaving school and skipping class one day and going to Toys R Us and buying the Mattel Movie Masters Dark Knight, Batman, and Joker. And I also bought the Indiana Jones that came with the Lost Ark, the Ark of the Covenant. And, you know, it was such a powerful memory. I'll never forget that. That was just a great time. I went with my friend who had his license, and we drove to Toys R Us, and it was just great. And then later on, when I got my driver's license, I remember driving to get a DC Universe Classics figure. Well, I guess by that time it would have been Batman Legacy, Mattel's follow-up line. And I remember driving to Toys R Us to get that, and it was the Arkham City Batman and Two-Face 2-pack. And I remember the satisfaction of being a 16-year-old kid, driving myself to Toys R Us, buying the figures with my own money. I was like, this is it. I was hooked. And that was collection 1.0. I don't really count the stuff that I was playing with because I wasn't collecting it. I was just playing with it. And so I collected the Mattel DC stuff for a while, like a figure here, a figure there. But I do remember the first time I saw a line of figures and thought, oh, wow, I need those. I need to have all of those. And it was DC Direct's Batman the Animated Series line. And I was in college, or maybe I just graduated, but I remember I was working my first job out of college. I was working as a copywriter. And a couple days a week, I would take a detour on the way home, drive to my local comic book store, buy a Batman the Animated Series figure, bring it home, and put it on a shelf or something. I don't remember what I was doing with them at the time, but anyway, that led to more. It was in 2018, the Marvel Legends, the first 10 years, the first MCU roundup line of figures came out. And I remember that gave me the opportunity to kind of catch up, so to speak. And it was a really, really, really fun time because I was living in Atlanta, Georgia, and it was like the peak of the film industry being in Atlanta. So I was on set all the time. It was a really magical time. We lived in a really nice building, and we were on set all the time. And the hype for Infinity War and Endgame was just growing and growing and growing. And it felt so cool to be like, ooh, we have the new figures coming out. Oh, like it felt so current. You know what I mean? It felt like this is like an ongoing thing. And this is when I first started to kind of venture into the YouTube, toy community, Instagram toy community kind of thing. And so I felt like I was in the flow of the collecting sphere. And then a couple things happened. Number one, Endgame came out and the MCU kind of wrapped up. And my girlfriend and I, my wife now, moved across the country to Los Angeles. And I left all of my figures back at home, and I was like, you know what? I don't need them. Let's close this chapter. It was fun. Moving on to Hollywood, moving on to the real business. And that didn't last very long. LA was super lonely. And then the pandemic happened, and we were locked down for over a year. So I had my mom, who is a saint, ship me my toys. And she packed them so carefully. It was very sweet. But then I had them, and I was looking at my MCU stuff, and I was like, this is over. this doesn't hold as much value now because there's not that next big movie event like Spider-Man No Way Home came out, but it still didn't feel like it was like Endgame had such a finality to it. And I was like, you know what? The hype has kind of died down. And as cool as the Batman the Animated Series stuff was, they were super delicate and they were getting more and more expensive as more were coming out. And there was question of like, are they going to continue this line? And it got to a point where it felt like buying another MCU figure. I remember it was the War Machine Iron Patriot armor, and it was the Two-Face wave of Batman the Animated Series. Those two waves, whichever order they came out in, I don't remember, those felt like chores to me. And I was like, you know what? This doesn't feel fun anymore. It's time to unload these figures. So I took them to my local comic book store, and I sold them all. And I said, you know what? We're going to keep collecting because I love the hobby, but we're going to shift gears. So I had always wanted to do a comic book X-Men collection. So I sold the MCU stuff. I took that money and I started buying comic book Marvel Legends. This is collection 2.0, if you're keeping up. And then McFarlane took over the DC license, so I sold all of the Mattel stuff, and I went all in on the McFarlane stuff. We'll call that collection 3.0. So Marvel Legends, McFarlane Toys, DC Multiverse. And then I started dipping my toe into G.I. Joe Classified. And then that's collection 4.0. So you see how it's starting to get messy. And then I added some Black Series figures, and that escalated quickly. Now it's 2025, and I have a ton of Marvel Legends. So many characters, so many character variants. And then I had the DC Multiverse figures. And not only did I have the DC Multiverse figures, but I was never satisfied with a Batman or a Superman that McFarlane released. So I wound up, for every one Batman that I had, I would buy like 2 or 3 different ones so that I could pull the pieces apart and put them together and make some Frankenstein version of what I considered to be a good Batman figure. And a Batman figure that I was happy with. And I had G.I. Joes. And I had Star Wars Black Series. And I started the Power Rangers Lightning collection. And I got a few Mafex figures. And it was too much. It was too much. My guest room closet was like stacked as tall as me with bins. And I just had a moment of, what am I doing here? What is this? And I was constantly in a state of being more excited about buying the next thing than I was excited by what I had. So it was time for a pruning. So I sold my G.I. Joe Classified figures and I sold my Lightning Collection figures. They were not providing the nostalgia that I thought they would when I first ordered them. And I sold my Mafex figures because they were very expensive. We'll talk about that in a second. And I was collecting the DC Universe, or the DC Multiverse from McFarlane, and it felt silly to have 2 congruent lines of DC figures, overlapping on the same character every once in a while. That felt silly. But I still wasn't happy with it. I wasn't happy with my collection. Something was missing. It wasn't providing that excitement or nostalgia that I needed. I was just kind of buying a figure, taking a picture, and putting it on my desk for a second, and then it was in a bin. So, you guessed it. It's pruning time. Now, this is after McFarlane Toys. It was announced that McFarlane Toys were losing the license. So I pulled everything out and I went through it. And I actually had ChatGPT. This is you're seeing the evolution from when I was a kid playing with toys, my parents buying them for me, to AI telling me what to keep and what to get rid of. I had ChatGPT say, help me out, like figure out the heavy hitters. I was like, listen, I want a collection of 10 Avengers and 5 villains. Help me narrow the playing field. Help me narrow this collection down. And it gave me like a really, really thoughtful list of the main characters from Marvel Comics, from like the Avengers sphere, and their villains. And so I used that for Marvel Legends. I used it for Star Wars Black Series figures, and I used it for the DC Multiverse stuff. So I used that as a starting place to really start trimming. And I got rid of a ton of Legends. I kept the Spider-Man retro carded series, anything that looked like animated series figures. I kept the X-Men line. I kept the X-Men lineup of their kind of like 90s animated series / Jim Lee outfit, and a classic Avengers line. And that was it. No more Marvel Legends than that. It's still quite a few, but then I did the same for Star Wars, and I wound up getting rid of all of the prequel figures, and I kept my the OT figures, kind of reminiscent of Power of the Force. If you pay attention, you'll see where we're going full circle with this. And then when it came to McFarlane, it was like, okay, I'm not really happy with any of the main line or the main characters. I don't like Wonder Woman that much. I don't like Batman that much. I don't like Superman that much. They're all just not quite up to what I want from the main version of my favorite characters. And so I think I had a moment of thinking I chose to go with McFarlane over Mafex because I could build a world around them. I could get all these other characters. But when you really think about it, you realize those other characters aren't the reason you're collecting. You're collecting because you like Batman or Superman. At least that's my case. I'm not super familiar with the depths of DC Comics. I don't need a world around Batman. I just need a Batman. And once I had that realization, I decided to part ways with it. Put it all up on eBay. My entire collection is on eBay right now. It's selling like crazy. But if you want to check it out, shameless plug, it's on eBay. So Mattel is going to take over the DC license starting in 2027. So I'm going to wait and see what they do. And in the meantime, we're back to previous collecting habits. I'm going to pick up a few of the Mafex Hush figures. Superman, Batman, couple Rogues, maybe a couple Reign of the Superman figures, because they are what I would consider definitive versions of those characters. You're not kind of like mixing and matching different looks and different artist styles and stuff like that. It's just kind of like, this is the Mafex Superman, this is the Mafex Batman. Whether it's the Hush Batman or the Nightfall Batman, they still look like the Mafex Batman. It's just a definitive Batman. So whereas I could spend $100 on one Mafex figure, I could also spend $20 per McFarlane Batman figure and wind up buying 4 or 5 of them to cobble them together to make one that's not even as good as the one Mafex figure. It just kind of, you get it. So when I released myself from the concept of world building, the decision became very, very clear. It was humbling in a way because of how far I'd gone and how many iterations of the collection I'd had. This is collection 5.0 now, by the way. And in the interim, so I'm doing some Mafex figures, and I'm really, really, really enjoying going back to McFarlane, picking up some of the Batman the Animated Series reissues that they did. There was a couple good things about them. The original DC Direct ones were so brittle and so breakable and just kind of felt flimsy in your hand. Like if you look at them wrong, they will break. The McFarlane figures are actually the same mold, but cast in a different plastic, so they're a little bit more durable. But yeah, I'm much happier. I'm so much happier. And I know what I have. And that is just kind of like, I don't know, I find peace in that. This collecting thing brings me so much more joy now. And it's funny, if you remember when I was a kid, I said I was collecting Batman the Animated Series, Spider-Man the Animated Series, X-Men the Animated Series, and Star Wars Power of the Force. And now, as a grown adult, I'm gravitating towards Batman the Animated Series, Spider-Man the Animated Series, Marvel Legends, X-Men the Animated Series, Marvel Legends, and original trilogy Black Series figures. The nostalgia is like, has come full circle. And it's a really, really great thing. So am I suggesting you prune your entire collection? No, absolutely not. Am I judging you for keeping hundreds of figures all over your house? No, absolutely not. I'm just super stoked that I found more joy and appreciation in my own collection. And if you're feeling drained by yours, or maybe you're starting to feel like it's a chore to buy the next figure in a line when it comes out, I would suggest, do a serious inventory of what you have, see what you can get rid of, make a list, make like the definitive, I cannot live without this figure list, and then make I might be able to part with this figure list. And I'm not saying you have to get rid of everything on the parting list, but you could at least get an idea of like what really means something to you. And it might reframe your idea of what it means to collect action figures, and it could bring you some more joy. Because this hobby has to be fun. It has to bring joy. Otherwise, it is with no hyperbole attached, it is pointless. It is a huge waste of money if you're not seeing joy from it. If it's not bringing you something valuable, it is a massive, massive waste of money and time. These things, these action figures, they are not progressing your career unless you're like a YouTuber who does nothing but talk about action figures. Then by all means carry on. But it's not going to progress your career. You're not going to get rich off of them one day. Like anybody who's collecting action figures thinking they're going to sell them and be a millionaire, that you're just not. You're not. And yeah, it's got to be fun. You got to find the joy in it. And I am proud to say that I have reclaimed the joy in it. So that's all for today. I hope this didn't ruffle too many feathers. Think about it. Just give it a ponder. And I will see you next week. Thanks, guys.